Hello and welcome to this video on why Brexit has proved to be a bad idea for the UK. For those who may not be familiar, Brexit refers to the United Kingdom's decision to leave the European Union, which it officially did on January 31, 2020. The decision to leave the EU was made in a referendum held in June 2016, when 52% of voters chose to leave. Since then, the process of actually leaving the EU, and negotiating a new relationship with the bloc, has proven to be much more complicated and costly than many people anticipated. In this video, we'll take a look at some of the ways in which Brexit is proving to be a bad idea for the UK. Some people argue, with no demonstrable proof by the way, that Brexit has brought some benefits to the UK. Sovereignty. Brexit supporters argue that leaving the EU has allowed the UK to take back control of its own laws and decision-making processes. However, this is a very tenuous argument at best, as much of the EU configuration remains till this day. The UK hasn't suddenly become any more lawful or sovereign in the wake of Brexit than it was as a member of the EU. Trade opportunities. Some argue that Brexit has opened up opportunities for the UK to negotiate new trade deals with countries outside of the EU. However, opportunities to negotiate deals have been few and far between, and the total value of any small deals that may have been negotiated is extremely paltry compared to the value of trade that Britain was able to accomplish while within the EU. Immigration control. Some people argue that Brexit has allowed the UK to have more control over its immigration policies, including the ability to set its own rules for immigration from EU countries. However, several current headlines, including those on the controversial Rwanda scheme, would suggest that that's not the case. Funding for domestic priorities. Some people argue that the UK's contributions to the EU budget can now be used for domestic priorities, such as the National Health Service and education. This is also baseless, as since Brexit, the UK has continued to follow many EU regulations, including making contributions to the EU budget. Yes, the £350 million a week for the NHS on the side of that bus was a myth. If that level of investment was made into the NHS, as flippantly promised, I think we'd all see the difference. And the recent nurses' strikes certainly wouldn't have materialised. So let's look at some of the reality of why Brexit has proved to be a bad idea so far. First and foremost, leaving the EU has come at a significant economic cost. The UK economy has struggled since the referendum, with GDP growth slowing and the value of the pound declining. In the months leading up to the referendum, the pound reached a high of around $1.50. Today, it is worth less than $1.20, representing a significant decline in value. The full impact of Brexit will likely continue to be debated for years to come, but let's focus a bit more on what we do know about the economic impact. Brexit has been described as an act of economic self-harm, inflicted with the arrogant stiff upper lip attitude of certain politicians, who lied and tricked their way into rousing many voters into a false sense of autonomous control that would enrich the UK. If we look at the breakdown of the vote, it's possible to see how older voters may have been nostalgically swayed with the promise of a revived empire-style autonomy and prosperity that would never work in the 21st century anyway. The world has simply moved on from those dark days. Anyway, according to data from the UK's Office for National Statistics, the breakdown of the vote by age group was as follows. Of 18 to 24-year-olds, 75% voted to remain in the EU, and 25% voted to leave. In the 25 to 34 age group, 60% voted to remain, while 40% voted to leave. In the 35 to 44-year-old demographic, 57% voted to remain and 43% voted to leave. Among 45 to 54-year-olds, 53% voted to remain, while 47% voted to leave. In the 55 to 64 age group, 44% voted to remain, 56% voted to leave. Among 65-year-olds and over, 39% voted to remain, while 61% voted to leave. Interestingly enough, many of those who campaigned vehemently and ubiquitously for Brexit on falsehoods and bravado are either now conspicuously silent on the subject, or resigned to erroneously using the pandemic and the Russian offensive against Ukraine as a smokescreen for Britain's lack of economic growth and its overall poor economic state. Perhaps it's quite telling that the economies of other EU countries who went through the same pandemic and are equally impacted by the Russian offensive are not performing quite as badly as the UK's. In fact, some economists and financial authorities have recently shown, with compelling evidence, the direct link between Brexit and Britain's economic woes. According to some analyses, Brexit is directly responsible for a 4% loss of GDP and has cost the UK billions in lost trade and tax revenues, thereby dealing the economy a lethal blow from which it will struggle to recover any time soon. In addition to the decline in the value of the pound, Brexit has also led to a decrease in foreign investment in the UK. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, foreign direct investment in the UK fell by 43% in the year following the referendum. This is a significant loss for the UK economy, as foreign investment helps to create jobs and stimulate growth. Another economic impact of Brexit has been the rise in food and other household item prices. According to the Office for National Statistics, food prices in the UK have risen by 3.9% since the referendum, with some items, such as pasta and coffee, seeing even larger price increases. This is due in part to the increase in tariffs on imported goods, as well as the added costs of new customs procedures. The reality on the ground is that so many small to medium-sized businesses have either wound up, or have no hope of survival, due to the trade barriers that Brexit has introduced. Brexit has significantly exacerbated an economy that was already suffering from low to no growth, and has had to endure the pandemic and the global economic effects of Russia's offensive against Ukraine. In addition to the economic costs of Brexit, there have indeed been social and political consequences. Leaving the EU has been divisive and has led to increased tensions within the UK. There have been numerous protests and demonstrations on both sides of the issue, and of late so many public sector strikes by workers feeling the pinch of an ailing economy which has very likely been caused, but definitely exposed and worsened, by Brexit. Furthermore, Brexit has also had an impact on the UK's relationships with other countries. The UK was a member of the EU single market, which allows for the free movement of goods, services, and people within the EU. By leaving the EU, the UK has lost access to this market and has had to negotiate new trade deals with other countries. As pointed out, this hasn't worked out so well. These negotiations have been difficult and time-consuming, and it remains to be seen how beneficial they will be for the UK in the long run. In conclusion, Brexit has had a negative effect on the UK for all the reasons discussed. It simply isn't factual or objective to suggest, as some try to, that Brexit has been advantageous to the UK. Anyway, thank you for watching this video on why Brexit has so far proved to be a bad idea for the UK. If you enjoyed the video, or found the information useful, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and subscribing to our channel for more informative content. See you in the next one.